Hello, my name is Rhonda Ortiz, and I'm going to read a selection of scenes today from my award-winning novel, In Pieces, the first book of the Molly Chase series. It's set in 1793 Boston, and I'm going to read a selection, chapter 15, Molly and Josiah Purchase Some Cloth. So it's a long chapter, but I think you guys will enjoy this. Chapter 15. Molly sat on the front parlor windowsill, wearing her charcoal gray redingcoat gown, holding her hat and gloves on her lap, waiting for Josiah. The morning sun filtered through the window glass, refracting into short waves of gold light on the worn, waxed floorboards. A similar pattern of light used to appear on the wall of her bedroom at the same hour of the day. As a child, she would lie in bed, mesmerized by the sunlight's color and translucence, staring at it for what could have been minutes, but felt like an eternity. She remembered wanting to capture the light and make it permanent, so that she could look on it whenever she wanted. An impossible wish. The sun always moved, and the pattern would fade away. One day she had been staring at the sunbeams when Papa entered her room and told her they were going for a drive. He said he wanted a change of scenery and thought she would enjoy a picnic. She was 7, and picnicking with her father was nothing short of heaven. They drove a few miles out of town. The redcoats were no longer in Boston, and found a grove of trees next to a pond. They ate while Papa listened to her prattle, and then they walked alongside the pond, he pointing out tadpoles, minnows, and plants. He had brought a newspaper with him, but instead of reading it, he took a sheet and folded it into a boat. Together they set it afloat on the pond and watched as the breeze pushed it slowly across the surface. As was inevitable, the paper boat took on water and sank. Molly had not expected that. She remembered how wet her cheeks were from her tears. Papa did not scold her for crying. He simply took another sheet of paper, folded a second boat, and handed it to her to keep. Her tears dried. She felt so safe beside him that her father could do anything. They packed up their picnic lunch and drove back to Boston, she clutching her boat, he sitting tall and strong as he drove. Years later, Molly learned that had been the day her mother lost yet another child, a son. The signs began early in the morning, and Papa, frustrated at being unable to help the physician and midwives, fled the house, taking Molly with him. After that, there were no more babies. Mama wouldn't survive another one. There also were no more picnics. Papa buried himself in his work. Later that year, the Robs moved in. Papa took immediately to Josiah, drove him places, let him follow him around while he worked, laughed at his jests, and spoke to him of Captain Rob. Everyone liked Josiah. Everyone except Molly. She wanted to spend time with Papa as well, but all his attention now went to Josiah, to his education, to teaching him business and horsemanship, and to all the other things fathers did for sons, but not for daughters. A few years passed before Molly could accept that boys were special, that fathers were tasked with making sure boys grew into successful men themselves, and that Josiah's being a boy without a father of his own was not his fault. Once she had figured that out, she decided she could like Josiah most of the time. As a grown woman, she knew their family situation was more nuanced than that. Still, Papa always listened to Josiah, never her. She couldn't help wondering if, had Josiah been home, Papa would not have taken his own life. A shadow passed behind her, obscuring the waves of sunlight. Molly turned and looked out the window. Josiah had arrived with the wagon. A minute later, he swung open the front passage door, the crisp spring air swinging in with him. Se brillante estradoria estradinaria. I do not have Josiah's language abilities, by the way. Estradinaria. He stopped abruptly. Buongiorno. That means good morning. The bounce in Josiah's step was too bouncy. He looked overtired. His eyes were red, with dark circles underneath. Had their troubles kept him awake? Molly bobbed her head. Good morning to you, too. You are in a cheery mood. I've discovered a secret, and you know how I like that. He glanced at her outfit. Wearing gray. You obeyed orders. I'm not always obstinate. She ran her fingers over the quilted cotton petticoat, tracing the small, tight stitches of the scrolls and flowers pattern. The cloth had faded, but the quilting work was still exquisite. This was my grandmother's. Mama made it for her after Grandpapa died. I barely remember him, but I do remember watching Mama and thinking that I wanted to learn mantua making too. This petticoat has a matching gown, but it is so out of fashion that I cannot possibly wear it. Of course you couldn't. He winked. Ready? Molly followed him outside, he closing the door behind them. You are acting mysterious, she said, after he had helped her onto the wagon seat. Why am I in half mourning today? You will see. Josiah hopped up onto the seat beside her and took the reins. On his command, Perdita walked, and the wagon lumbered forward. The toe of his shoe tapped the board at their feet. He had something up his sleeve. Molly, do you trust me? A serious question from a scheming man. Yes, you know I do. Good. I need you today. Can you manage one last trip to your father's warehouse? Her stomach tensed. The warehouse was the last place she wanted to be. Can you? Because if you cannot, she pushed aside her hesitation. I will be all right. You are with me. Excellent. Next question. Do you remember how much you paid for all that silk and muslin? Yes, but the receipt is at... Molly's hand fell to her waist. Your mother told you? I asked her not to. Tell me what? Perturbed, she didn't answer. He chuckled. Mother didn't tell me. I guessed. You've been running your father's business. How else would you have known what was in there and where to find it? Josiah thought it was funny, which was exactly why she did not want him knowing. Don't laugh at me. I had to. Papa had not been himself for months. I'm not laughing at you. I'm thoroughly impressed. He sounded sincere. Molly pulled her hand from her hip and dropped it back onto her lap. I'm surprised it took you a week to figure it out. You're getting slow in your old age. And to answer your question, yes, I remember the prices. Perfect. The hard wagon seat bumped beneath them as Josiah turned off Marlborough onto paved Milk Street, upsetting a flock of sparrows. Perdita whinnied as they flapped underneath her hooves. Textiles never made sense to me, no matter how many times your father tried to teach me. I don't know what I'm looking at, and I need your help. Otherwise, we won't get a good deal. On what? On the cloth. You still want it? We need wool, at least. Someone owes me a suit. Slow down. Are you thinking of buying it for me? The auction is Friday, and we sail on Thursday. I've made an appointment with Mr. Young to discuss a purchase ahead of time. I'm making an investment. Molly was thoroughly confused. You're investing in textiles? No, I'm investing in you. Mother told me you want to pick up work. And it occurred to me that if you chose that material, then it would be the finest quality and exactly what you would want. Not a subpar and overpriced option you would get somewhere else. How astute. But this is an expensive purchase, Josiah. Not if we play it right. His eyes glinted. Have you ever haggled? Haggling? No wonder he was excited. He was a hunter moving in for the kill. No, never. I go from shop to shop to shop until I find the price I want. Less bloodshed that way. Ugh, women. Are we really going to haggle over Papa's wares? It's unseemly. It's better than stealing, Maldal. A jest that stung. She already felt guilty. She did not need his condemnation, too. Molly looked to the street. True, that also was unseemly, immoral, even stupid. Her words stopped on her tongue. At the market across the street stood the same servant who had been watching her at Old South yesterday. She wore a different gown, and her broad hat hid her face, but Molly would recognize the woman's perfect posture anywhere. Josiah pulled Perdita to a stop. His hand covered Molly's, pulling her attention back to himself. Ma chère amie, I'm sorry, I shan't tease you again. It was the second time he had taken her hand, which was odd, but not unwelcome. Molly appreciated his desire to comfort her. She also appreciated his apology. Not often did she hear an "I'm sorry" out of Josiah. In a few days, all your father's friends and business associates will be haggling over his wares. I would rather beat them to it and get you what you need, but I cannot do it without you. He wanted to help her again. She did not know where to look. This is why you asked me not to wear black. As you say, I wouldn't wish for us to appear inappropriate. But, Molly, I would let go of any scruples. Your father's debt does not pass on to you. The only ones who are hurt by this exchange are his creditors. Frankly, I am not fond of them. Neither was she. Papa's business had turned south a few months after Mama fell ill. He had been so distracted, and his creditors had shown little grace. All right. Molly squeezed Josiah's hand in agreement, businesslike. What currency are we negotiating in? The glint returned to his eye. English sterling. She nodded. Part of the inventory had come from France, but she could do the conversions. What do you need me to do? We're going to browse the warehouse. Act nonchalant. When you find something you want, say so aloud, and this is important, name a price per yard, but 3 shillings below the price you paid. I'll take it from there. Oh, and if it's something you want badly, get excited, even plead with me, but name those prices at 4 shillings below. 3 shillings, 4 shillings. I can do that. Good. Josiah released her hand and took the reins again. Whatever happens, Molly, whatever I do not act surprised. Mr. Young stared at them over his spectacles as he sorted through a stack of paperwork, sitting on top of the cracked cherry table. The warehouse today was nothing like the warehouse of 2 Sundays ago. Sunlight streamed in through the open shutters. The stove was lit, the floor swept, the cobwebs gone, and only a hint of stench remained. Sam Dillard, one of Papa's employees, moved about the shelves behind them, hauling crates up and down. I remember the 2 of you as children, Mr. Young said. Thick as thieves. Molly folded her hands in front of her, a picture of innocence. The lawyer had been more than surprised to see her and Josiah. Already he was wary of them and their errand. Josiah's face turned puckish. Nothing has changed, sir. And you want to buy silk. Extravagant, considering the circumstances. Mr. Young scanned each sheet of paper before turning it on to a nearby pile. If you want my opinion, Miss Chase, after spending a considerable amount of time looking over your father's accounts, I would say 'tis time you learned the meaning of economy. Silk, of all things. The silk is not for me. She ladled on the sweetness. You are correct, Mr. Young. The silk is for my clients. I'm taking seamstress work. Miss Chase will need more than a single bolt, Josiah added. We are looking to make a large purchase. I suppose this explains why I found cloth strewn across the building last week. Mr. Young eyed them before returning to his papers. My time is valuable, Mr. Robb. As you well know, the late Mr. Chase dealt in luxury goods. The prices are far beyond the means of a mere sailor. If you will excuse me." He straightened up and motioned toward the door. "This mere sailor has means. But since you do not believe me..." Josiah reached into his greatcoat and pulled out a leather counterpurse. He dropped it on the table between themselves and Mr. Young, the purse landing on top of Mr. Young's paperwork with a heavy clunk. Molly gasped, Mr. Young jerked, and Sam's ruddy face appeared around the corner of the nearby shelf, curious. Josiah had a lot of money in that purse. He had a lot of money in that purse. Where on earth did he get all that money? She stared at him, mouth slack. But Josiah wouldn't look at her. He measured Mr. Young, who in turn measured him, shaggy eyebrow cocked. Shaking sense into herself, she shut her mouth. Josiah had told her not to act surprised. But he should have warned her if he was going to pull a stunt like that. His purse must hold at least 400 pounds, if not more. He pocketed the money. "I'm a serious buyer. May we browse?" "I suppose so." The lawyer turned to his receipts again. Josiah tucked Molly's hand into his elbow, guiding her toward the back of the warehouse and away from Mr. Young. He bent down to whisper in her ear, "I never liked that man." She pinched the inside of his arm. "You cannot do that to me, Josiah." "Ow," he scowled. "Do what?" "Scare me half to death. You have more money in your pocket than most professional men make in a year. Where did you get that? I didn't know the Althea was a pirate ship." "I told you, this is an investment. It requires real capital." Josiah pulled her closer. "Bringing this much convinced Mr. Young to take us seriously." She tipped her chin up and glared at him. "You were right. You're a complete stranger to me." "I'll explain later. Please trust me." "Are you pleading?" "Maybe." Molly could never resist him when he pleaded. "Fine, but don't be surprised if I start calling you Blackbeard. You may call me whatever you want, so long as you trust me. Though for the sake of accuracy, my beard grows out brown, not black." He smiled. "Are you ready?" She nodded. Josiah released her arm and with a little push on her back sent her forward a few paces. Then he stopped to examine some crates of wine, feigning interest clearly. With a final glare and a firm step, Molly left him and worked her way toward the textile stores. The air was warm close to the stove at this end of the warehouse. Nearby, the bolts lay in rows on top of 2 storage chests, along with the school slate covered in Sam's scrawl. The third chest, the one that had held the raccoon, had been pulled apart, its boards stacked against the wall. Everything in that chest was ruined. Sam wove his way down the aisle, hauling his ladder. "We found a dead critter. Back of the chest had split open and it squeezed in but couldn't get out. Turned my stomach." He propped the ladder against the shelf and shimmied up. The less said about the raccoon, the better. Molly stepped to the first bolt of cloth on the left and peeled back its covering. Blue-gray silk taffeta. Beside it were 3 bolts of the same, in different colors. "These are nice," she called to Josiah. "Be right there," he called back. They were not the best of the taffetas she ordered. As an artist, she would have passed on them. As a woman of business, she saw their value. Few people cared about the nuances of quality like she did. A mid-range silk would suit most women fine. Plus, being solid colors, these taffetas had an advantage. She could use the same cloth for different clients without anyone feeling their dress lacked originality. Nothing was worse than arriving at a pattern cloth was harder to use more than once. Nothing was worse than arriving at a party wearing the same thing as someone else. "This taffeta has any number of possibilities," she said to Josiah. "But I fancy a jacket and a gilet in the hussard style. Same as a man's hunting coat, but short and for a woman. Button fasteners in the front of the gilet, lacing in the back, floral embroidery. Have mercy and spare me the details. I'm coming." He meandered her way. "Miss Chase, before we discuss pricing, I need to find the receipt on this order." Mr. Young's voice echoed down the aisle. He approached, shuffling papers. "Your father seems to have misplaced it." Yes, Molly knew. That receipt ended up at the Robs, in a valise under her bed. Terribly disorganized of him. She sighed. Did he? How unfortunate. Papa's desk was always a mess. From behind Mr. Young, Josiah caught her eye. "Misplaced it?" he mouthed. Molly answered him with the slightest lift of her chin. The corners of his mouth twitched. She lifted her chin another quarter inch, triumphant. Josiah straightened his face and moved to her side to inspect the taffeta. "How much were you thinking for this?" 8 and 6 pence a yard. 3 shillings below the price she paid, 7 shillings less than shop prices. This is a 40-yard bill, 17 pounds total. 8 and 6 is low. Mr. Young set the papers and his spectacles down. My wife recently bought silk similar to this at Ford's for at least 14. That's what the draper sells it for, Josiah said. We're interested in what Mr. Chase paid. The price of silk is only going up, thanks to those French radicals destroying their factories. I do not want to miss an opportunity to pay down Mr. Chase's debts. No one has more interest in clearing my father's name than myself. Molly risked a gentle hand on Mr. Young's sleeve. Yet I hope you will be gracious enough to sell me a few of my father's goods close to the prices he paid. We are making a large purchase, Josiah added. Mr. Young's face contorted, weighing his options. All right, miss. How about 12 shillings? The lady says 8. With all due respect, this lady has little idea of what things cost. Molly bit her tongue. 9, Josiah said. 11 and 6. 9 and 6. Sam peeked over the top of the shelf. Mr. Robb drives a hard bargain, don't he, sir? I should not have to haggle at all, Josiah said, as the cloth is for Miss Chase, not me. Aye, that's a fact. Sam pulled a dusty crate closer to himself and hoisted it onto his shoulder. He climbed down the ladder one-handed, balancing the crate against the side of his head with the other. Miss Chase is the only reason Mr. Chase ain't in more debt. No one saw hide or hair of him down here since the missus died. Mr. Young's shoulders dropped. Very well. 9 and 6. 9 shillings and 6 pence a yard equaled 19 pounds for the bolt, which was 4 pounds less than the price she originally paid. And she could still charge clients a full price at 15 and 6. Or 15 and they would think they were getting a deal. No wonder Josiah enjoyed this. They continued to sort through the bolts of cloth. Soon they added woolens, a couple of plain muslins, and a white lawn to their pile of loot. Molly was looking for her Indian muslin when she spotted the turquoise Leon silk satin. She ran it through her fingers and sighed admiringly. With a glance at Mr. Young, who was rifling through his papers, she turned to Josiah and attempted some elementary French. J'adore cette soie extrêmement chère. I adore this extremely expensive silk, and by the way, my French is as bad as Molly's. C'est très cher, he enunciated each word slowly. It would be expensive. May we get it? She batted her eyes. Please? I have someone in mind for this. Who? Joy Christensen? I should have guessed. He gave her an imperceptible nod. Then, crossing his arms across his waistcoat, he exhaled loudly. How much? 14. 4 shillings less than she paid for it. 10 shillings less than shop prices. This is expensive. Joy will want it. Shaking his head at her, he turned to Mr. Young. What do you think, sir? Mr. Young's shaggy brows folded into a single line. Certainly not 14. I would say 20. How about 17? 17? Only 1 shilling less than what she paid for it. Josiah wasn't looking for a deal. No, Molly said. I cannot let you spend that kind of money. I thought you wanted it. I do, but not at 17. Josiah narrowed his eye, trying to read her. Would you let me spend 16? Certainly no more than 15. She tipped her head coquettishly. Though you are so sweet to indulge me, I will never be able to afford anything this fine. Ever, ever, ever again. Behind his ladder, Sam's face twisted in silent laughter. He knew how badly she wanted the satin. He had heard her cooing over it back in December when the shipment first arrived. Mr. Young harumphed. It must be worth more than 15 a yard, Miss Chase. Perhaps we'd pass on this one. Wait. Josiah held up a hand. Molly, what else are you looking for? Linen, a few more woolens, and somewhere here is an order of Indian muslin. We already have muslin. Not this muslin, if you say so. Josiah turned to Mr. Young, counting the total on his fingers. So, the muslin at 5, the silk at 14 or 15, 5 bolts of woolens. He paused. How much would you charge for the whole lot? Everything? She tamped out a squeal. You cannot mean that. He ignored her. Mr. Young splayed his hands. 700 pounds? There's a lot of cloth in here. I'll give you 6. What was he doing? Mr. Young shook his head. 675. 650. This was far too much, even if she could sell it. Molly had to clench her fists at her side to keep from strangling Josiah. It would take her at least 2 years to make good on his investment, let alone earn anything for herself. And where would they store all this cloth? In his parlor? Sam propped his elbows on the top of the shelf and grinned at them. Meanwhile, Mr. Young was wavering. He glanced at his papers, thinking, then tucked them under his arm. That is a fine offer, Mr. Robb, but you're still a bit short. Josiah pursed his lips. How about 670 if you also throw in the horse and wagon? So that was what he wanted. Molly jammed her fist against her mouth to keep from laughing, or killing him, or both. Mr. Young pulled off his spectacles. 680 with it all. That is my final price. I'll take it. The transaction was made. Molly rubbed Perdita's muzzle and waited while Josiah and Sam loaded the first half of the order into the wagon. Josiah would make a second trip this afternoon for the rest. Your new owner is a madman, she informed Perdita. Now we have to find a place to put all this cloth. He forgot to buy me a warehouse. Perdita tapped Molly's shoulder with her nose. You're right. He also forgot to buy you a stable. Josiah looked over the top of their wagon load, beaming giddiness. Don't be angry with me, Muldall. That was too much fun. He latched the wagon's gate and circled around to help her onto the seat. You have no idea how good you are, haggling me down over that ridiculous blue silk. Absolutely brilliant. You're coming with me every time. Unfortunate that Mr. Young was not fooled. Oh, I could have worked him back around. Probably would have gotten it for 16. He sat on the seat beside her and took the reins. I've missed making mischief with you. His voice was gentle. Someone was feeling sentimental again. I have too, she said, just as gently. Part of growing up, I suppose. Josiah commanded Perdita to walk, while Molly brushed horsehair from her redingote. She and Mama had designed and sewn the redingote together. With its lapels and large, flat brass military buttons, it had a distinctively American feel to it. Could outerwear be patriotic? Speaking of mischief, she said once they were moving, you surprised me back there. Tell me where the money came from, Blackbeard. Not what you were expecting, was it? Josiah bumped her arm with his elbow. I have done nothing illicit, I promise. Working for a merchant doesn't pay all that well, but being the merchant does. My captain lends me cargo space, and I bring things home to sell. It's how I bought the house. Impressive. Not every man had the intelligence or pluck to turn a profit that way. She knew, having had first-hand experience. How did you know to do that? Your father, of course. When I left home at 15, he gave me money and told me to use it to make more. So I did. A lump rose to her throat. Papa gave you money? Yes. Josiah glanced down at her. I paid him back. Naturally, without a doubt. I'm grateful. My father wouldn't have been able to do it. He built the Thalia at the exact wrong time, right before the British closed Boston Harbor. Yes, I know. The lump in her throat thickened. If you don't mind me asking, how much did he give you? 1,000 pounds. Molly almost choked. Papa gave him 1,000 pounds? At 15 years old? This was far, far worse than spoiling him with Latin. What if he had lost it? What if his ship had sunk to the bottom of the sea? Who gave other people's children that kind of money? Only her father. Envy slithered through her. Molly turned her head away, straining to compose herself. It wasn't Josiah's fault that her father had loved him. She mustn't take it out on him. These were men's dealings, only business, mere money, nothing personal. But oh, it was hard to hear. Did I upset you? She took a breath and forced calm into her voice. No, I'm glad Papa was able to be so generous. He wanted me to do well in life. I suppose he thought that worth the risk. She nodded and let silence fall between them. What was it with men and sons? Papa had wanted a son so badly. Perhaps because sons pointed to the future. In a son, a man saw his legacy, his family name carried on, his reason for working hard and making his mark in the world. A daughter, on the other hand, was absorbed into another man's family, exchanging one name for another. Sons took wives. Daughters were given away. Molly. Josiah's voice dropped into its lower registers. You also are worth the risk. That was kind of him to say, but she did not need to hear it from Josiah. The person whose words mattered most lay cold in the grave. She couldn't meet his eyes. Thank you for my cloth. It's an investment. You know you shan't see any returns for some time, right? I can sew only so fast. I can wait.